Okay.
My name is Lena Winslow, and I am a nuclear medicine technologist. I am a integrative health and wellness coach. I am a mom. I'm a wife. And there's been a lot of things in my years of living that have brought me to this place. And I couldn't be any more grateful for all the wins and all the hardships because they work together in accomplishing this person that is me. My story started all the way back to when my daughter was diagnosed with autism. And my story of diverging from that mindset began because autism isn't treatable from the conventional medicine perspective. And we were told to wait and see at first, and I kind of refused to do that. Because I felt like while she was young, we had a chance to make an impact. And then we continued with this notion of, from the conventional side, there was nothing they could do. And so I started looking, now what else can I do? And I found it. I found all of these ways of looking at her diet, looking at what I was eating, because she was still a wee little one. I was feeding her with my milk. And I realized that there's that separation of researched medicine that has all the data, all the decades of research, and cutting edge, newly discovered science that hasn't had a chance to get to a place where it is proven yet, but it still works. And for my daughter, we didn't have 10 years to wait until it got proven. We had to act now. So that's what we did. And it gave us results.
So it all started with you having that mindset of finding an answer yourself, wasn't it? Like, just keep digging, really, wasn't it? Just keep digging until you find, and trying different things.
And honestly, looking at the process of coaching that I do now, there is that underlying why of why would a person choose to leave, let's say, smoking or drinking alcohol behind. And most of the time, if the answer is the doctor says I'm going to get sick, or the doctor says I'm not going to live very long if I continue, is not often good enough for the person to make that change. They must dig deeper within them and get to that internal why of, what legacy do I want to leave behind me? What do I want my children to learn through watching me? And if they are able to anchor onto a deeper why, such as that, and it's different for every person, then that behavior change follows and it becomes easier. In my case, I had to act for my daughter. And if I was faced with having to act for myself, like I did later with my cancer diagnosis, it might have not turned out to be the same. But at first, it had to be done for someone.
Yeah.
And then you develop that muscle and you keep going.
Absolutely. So sometimes it's easier to do that, knocking on the doors and saying that's not acceptable when you're doing it as a mother. Something else comes out in you, doesn't it? That you're there, that's your job. They can't speak for you. They can't speak for themselves. That's your job. But then tell me about the story with your mom and how you started on your journey with everything.
So my mother was a physician, and in her career, she graduated medical school as a pediatrician. And she could never sit still. She had lots of interests. So from pediatrician, she took some more classes and reprofiled and became a cardiologist. She did a lot of research in cardiology. Then from cardiology, she went into sports medicine. And she ended up treating high-level athletes basically on the field. And I got to witness most of these parts because I was old enough by then. And then after sports medicine, it was neurology. And in neurology, she was interpreting the EEGs and really tuned into brain health because Chernobyl nuclear disaster has happened right around that time. And she was on the front lines treating people coming out of that, not really having a lot of experience with radiation sickness or anything that comes after that. It was kind of a work in progress. And around that time is when she was diagnosed with breast cancer herself. And because of the fact that she was a physician and she had a friend immigrate to the United States, she was connected with a hospital in Orlando, Florida, and they sponsored her to come to the United States to get treatment. And so that's how the story began. We all kind of assumed that her cancer came out of exposure to radiation. I believe at this point, looking back, it was probably not related, but at that point, everyone was thinking that she was in remission for about 1 year, and then the cancer returned after that, her initial treatment. And when I was 18 years old, she passed away. And that's when I had to decide where I wanted to take my life from there. And it was almost like a compartment. I was able to compartmentalize these experiences and move forward. Only later, with my own diagnosis, did I allow myself to fully grasp and feel the gravity of what happened. But at the same time, I also felt the leading and the help that these hardships have brought to where I am now in becoming.
Oh, wow. Okay, so going through that with your mom really set you up for when you had the same diagnosis then.
So it was like a ton of bricks when I first got told that I had this breast cancer diagnosis. First of all, I
Were
found
you
my
a similar age? Sorry, were you a similar age to your mom? Or?
10 years younger than my mom. And so I found my own mass because I honestly think it was providence, because it was completely accidental how I discovered it. And I went to the doctor and they concluded and concurred with me that it was worth exploring. And then they took the tests and the biopsies and confirmed it. Now, for me, the big point of growth was I had to decide whether I was going to allow this movie of people not surviving this disease. The first image that came to my mind is my mother, and the day she died, I was there. And being in healthcare, I've also seen multiple women go through this process of not surviving breast cancer, and then continuously friends and family members. Once you have something like this happen in your family, it's almost like your radar is tuned in and you notice everyone that comes through. And for me, that movie of loss, that movie of hardship had to be changed. I had to flip that script and honestly simply believe that I could have a different story. And that's when I noticed that there aren't a lot of women that survived that are out there speaking about that, because it's almost like this guilty feeling of I survived and they didn't. And somehow it prevents you from celebrating being alive. And so this is kind of where it landed me, because I was reaching for that one face that I know that didn't die from cancer, and I couldn't find one. And making that choice that my story, my road was going to be different, no matter where it ended up, was the first step to that recovery, that slow and arduous pursuit of reconciliation between me, this disease, and all the things that have happened in my life.
So would you see that as a strength, or do you just see that as you're choosing to look at it differently?
I honestly think that it is a choice. And I think every single one of us has that ability to make the choice. And some of us need that extra picture of someone who has done that, and kind of that extra dose of belief that it's possible. And some of us have to make it up from whole cloth. And either way, it can be made in a moment. And it is simply believing in who you are, and that fact that we as humans, we have our human side, and then we have our infinite side that's connected to the ultimate source of power, whatever you choose to believe, God, the universe, and that there is a balance between the two. And anytime I feel scared, anytime I feel uncertain, anytime there is doubt, I recognize that I'm leaning into this human side. And yet at the same time, that infinite side is still present, and it's never going to go away. And all I need to do is shift just a little bit and recognize and lean into that infinite, that power, that possibility.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm with you completely on that. But to notice as well that it comes from action, doesn't it? It's not just sitting and willing. You had to take action. You had to take positive action. So tell me, what was the positive action that you took when you had that diagnosis, when you were given that same potential future that your mum had?
So my first thing was, I knew from the experiences in medicine before, and a lot of research and a lot of things I've heard. Honestly, it was just hearsay, but I chose to take the action of taking meat out of my diet. The doctor called me on Friday before a 3-day weekend. In America, we celebrate Memorial Day. And so we were going to have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off of work. And that weekend, I stopped eating meat. And this is over 3 years ago, and I haven't looked back. There's really not a lot of cravings, and I'm just moving forward with that choice. And I can't necessarily tell you exactly why I don't struggle with it, except for the fact that I made a choice. I made a choice to do it, and I didn't make it out of being forced. I made it out of my own free will, knowing that that was going to help further the goals that I have in life. Right? So that was the first thing. I didn't even know if that was the right thing to do at the time. Now I do. And then I took a month. I took an entire month of while they were doing tests, of deciding what I was going to choose as my treatment path. Because anytime you are faced with something like this, and multiple other occasions, there are so many choices. You can do this. You can do a mastectomy now. You can do chemo now. You can do a lumpectomy. You can do this other surgery. And there's just so many different things that, even though doctors can give you advice, you still are in the driver's seat. And my goal was not to make those choices out of fear, but to make them out of my own deep, this is what I want to do. Because having had the education that I have, I know now that when you go through a medical intervention and you firmly believe that you have chosen to do it rather than being pushed into it, that medical intervention is significantly more successful than if you were doing it out of fear.
perfect sense when you explain it like that, doesn't it? Because you're there and you understand the process.
Mhm.
You've kind of you've visualized it all
Mhm.
succeeding.
Right. It's almost like if you get pushed into it and you do it out of a chore or a sense of obligation, you're almost looking for something to go wrong, right? It's almost like peering behind the corner and seeing one little thing that gets in the way and saying, "Oh, see, I told you so." And if it is your choice, you are looking for every possibility of a solution anytime something gets in your way. And that's a whole different way of walking through something difficult.
Putting yourself in that position of power, isn't it? You're in control, although you're not where you would choose to be, but
Right.
despite that, you're here and you're in control, which makes you feel better. Because I could imagine you just said, I don't know, I don't need to know, I don't want to know. You just try and block it out.
Mhm. Right.
Um,
But that knowledge that you can still be in some level of control with your choices, even if you're in the midst of the situation you didn't choose to be in. Like my daughter's autism diagnosis, like my own road with cancer. I didn't choose to be there. However, I still have choices within that path, and I will take every single one of them I can.
and staying solution focused as well, because there have been days when that wasn't easy. How did you stay up there? Did you
Mm.
have a plan for that as well? Was that something you had to organize yourself, or do you get support with that?
So I did start going to a therapist who really did help ask questions and simply allowed me to be in those answers. What I discovered is most of those answers were already inside of me. I just had to ask the good questions. And that's where a support of someone that isn't going to give you the answers and isn't going to push you any one particular direction, but is there to hold that space and to allow you to recognize that you really are able to make those choices yourself and give you that room to breathe while you do that, which is why it is typical, in America at least, to have an entire month between the time they tell you they have cancer to the time they start active treatment. And in most cases, because you have to do testing, there's scheduling, there's treatment planning, there's a lot of little steps in between that get you to that exact path of active treatment. Most people around me, I felt like, dreaded the fact that there was a month. There was
Mhm.
this sense of urgency. Oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
put me on the table. Let's do all this stuff,
yeah.
burn,
Get it
crash,
out.
whatever. But I took it as the freedom to take that time and really settle and feel secure in what it is that's coming
Yeah.
after the end of those 30 days.
Oh, you must have had some awakenings,
Mhm.
to be thinking, and what about this? But what about this?
Yes, there was a lot of awakenings, but it first started with me getting to a place where I recognized that, family history, all the things that are in our childhood, even like I'm a third generation medical worker. My grandmother was a nurse in World War II. My mother was a doctor. My own degree is in medicine. And having that path and the experiences that we've all had, all three of our generations, leaves a certain amount of understanding, positive and negative. And dealing with that aspect of it that may bring you down and recognizing that some of it doesn't even belong to you, it belongs to the previous generations, gives you the freedom to say, my path can be different. I can do things that are not the same as the three previous generations. And that takes time, sometimes more than 30 days, but that's all I had is 30 days.
So tell me then, what was the outcome? What is the situation now with your own health? What was the outcome?
So we are about 3 years and several months after my diagnosis. Well, not after my diagnosis. They count the time post-cancer from the day you have your surgery. So we are over 3 years from the day I had my double mastectomy. I have had, I did not choose to do reconstruction immediately. I waited a year to do that. So, but at this point, I've done the reconstruction. I went through 4 months of chemotherapy. And at this point, I have rebuilt my system, my body, to where it's actually functioning even better than it was before in terms of my ability to do strenuous exercise, my ability to have my energy, and working with my children. I have 3 children, and it's funny because when you first get out of treatment, they want to see you every 3 months to check your blood, to like see if there's any indication of the cancer coming back. Now I'm on every 6 months, and before it was almost like my body knew that checkup was coming up.
Okay.
I wouldn't even realize that it was on the calendar, but about a week before, I would start feeling this in my bones, like thinking, oh, they're about to check me again. Like there's that feeling of dread. And at this point, it's just another day on the calendar for me. But it took time. It took about 3 years to get to a point of getting through that visceral response to all the things that have happened to my cells, my being, through this chemotherapy treatment, through this surgical intervention. I always say a person is in 3 parts: mind, body, and soul, right? So with your mind, I can understand everything that's coming up, like the 3 months checkup. I understand that this is good for me with my mind. With my soul, I am happy and complete, and I believe that I have a purpose that's bigger than this disease, and I believe that I survived to fulfill that purpose. And my soul is not scared. However, my body was traumatized. My body went through a significant impact with a scalpel and with some chemical agents that impacted every single organ system. And so my mind and my soul had to work with my body to calm it down.
Right. And they had to step up whilst your body was healing, I would imagine. Because that's
Right.
it, isn't it? The chemotherapy is poisoning the cancer, and on the way of poisoning it, it's poisoning everything else. Is that why your hair falls out? And, you know, so your body's had to have time to heal, and you've had to give it the best shot. So how do you run your lifestyle? How's your lifestyle different now compared to when it was? And, you know, what things, apart from not eating meat, you know, you don't look like you're worried and you're always anxious in case it comes back. You look like you're so at peace and you know yourself. You've got
Right.
you know, that self-awareness. But what is it that you're doing differently that you did before that you're not doing now?
So precisely that connection, before I got the cancer diagnosis, I lived in my mind. I always knew the academic reason, the rational answer, the everything that was coming up in my life was explained with my rational mind. However, when I functioned on that level, I didn't necessarily connect it with my heart and my soul. And so what I do now is I recognize that connection. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Why do you want to make this change? Why do you want your life to be different? It's not because there's that fear of dying. It's because there's a bigger and a greater purpose out of my life. And for me, that bigger and greater purpose out of my life is to be able to serve others that may or may not recognize that they're even on the path that I was on, right? A most recent quote from the book is that impacted me greatly is, death is more common than life because everybody dies, but not everybody lives.
Wow.
And so getting to that place where you are truly living is key to be able to do it in a calm, collected, and purposeful way, which is where I hope I am now.
Thank you all. So tell us about the book, because obviously how we met was online. We must have been attracted to the same concepts and the same learning and training that we needed to, I'm going to say, polish our message, get the message out from inside of here and give us the confidence to say, look, this is what we've been through. Me with my alcohol, you with your cancer diagnosis. Yes. And so we were hanging around in the same communities online. And it's just been marvelous. I feel like you're my colleague. I feel like we're growing together. And it's just interesting because I'm going along with my life and I'm seeing people coming up against this, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I want them to meet you. I want them to know your story. I want people to see, you know, the one that survived, the one that can see it through that different lens, and that it doesn't have to be that story, that, you know, it doesn't have to be like that. It can look different, and you can get in control. And you've shared that today. And that's what your concept is. I mean, I'm here with my alcohol support and supporting people on that journey. And you've got your own mission. So tell us what yours is.
So my mission is to support people. Obviously, I can help someone get through a cancer diagnosis and be that person who holds that space for them as they have the freedom to make their own choices of how they want to go through with this, so that they can have that maximum success, maximum control over an uncontrollable situation. That is something I've been through and I can do. My bigger mission, however, is to get to that person who was me before that cancer diagnosis, that person who was rationalizing everything in her head, thinking that there is a scientific proof behind every action, and not necessarily recognizing that infinite and that human connection, and almost blaming the human, even though the reason the human gets so large is because you don't recognize the infinite, right? And so that connecting the brain with the heart and moving in a direction of certainty, regardless of whether you have a diagnosis or if you really haven't gotten to a hardship yet, which is where I want to be. I want to make sure that there is a place and a turning point that people can decide and avoid all this stuff altogether. Right?
Okay. So that sounds like, obviously, give me a better idea of who would be your ideal client. And so maybe they haven't got a cancer diagnosis, or maybe they have had one and they've survived it, and they're that person who is, you mentioned before about they can't celebrate that. Maybe they're still holding their breath because they're frightened to live too much, or because I feel as if people would be looking at your choices, wouldn't they? They'd be looking and thinking, why are you doing that? Is it because of this, And it's like everything's pinned on it, isn't it? I can imagine a lady being stuck there with that, but also worried that it could come back.
Right. So that's a big fear for anyone who has gone through something like that, and that deep-seated trauma in their body, no matter where their mind and their soul is going to have to be dealt with. But in this person that I am speaking to, is that the perfectionistic tendency that tends to be part of who we are is more pronounced in some people than others. So this is that scientific mind that needs to have the proof, that needs to have a reason that's concretely spelled out on paper for everything. It's that person who, on the surface, feels like or portrays the persona that they know everything, that they can handle anything that comes at them professionally and personally, that they can juggle career and they can juggle family, and everything is in their spots. But inside they're scared because they realize that they really don't have it all together, that it really is impossible to be perfect at everything. And that balance of being one thing on the outside and another thing on the inside is the conflict that leads to alcohol, is the conflict that leads to a health diagnosis that can potentially be avoided if you resolve and accept that we are all human and we are all powerful at the same time.
Very well put. And how do you deliver that? Is that an online program? Is it coaching one-to-one? How do you get that out to the masses?
So I am developing an online program right now. Several of them are in the works, and I am working with, I don't call them clients, I call them coaching partners, because my take in this, I don't come into this relationship as a top-down kind of connection. It's a peer-to-peer, side-to-side, because what I recognize is that my coaching partner is an innate expert in themselves. And I am an expert in the coaching process and how to ask the questions and how to hold that space so that they can do their magic in deciding what their path is. I don't decide their path for them, they do. All I do is hold that space and ask the questions so that they can get that clarity. And that's where my value is. And I do this in one-on-ones and in group sessions. And it's really interesting. Some people say, how can you do this in a group situation? And it kind of circles us back to that book, because if I'm working one-on-one, the only experience we have to draw from is mine and theirs. If I'm working in a group, then the experiences multiply. And because as people, we have multiple facets to ourselves, those get illuminated to much more greater degree in a group, if you're willing to enter into that space trustingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if you're willing to participate, you get as much out as you put in, is really what you're saying. So that leads us nicely onto the project that you've been just involved in. Tell us about the wonderful idea for a Christmas present as well, isn't it? If we get this out before Christmas in time. Tell us.
I was very, very blessed and honored to be chosen to be in a book. this past fall. And this book is called When Love Speaks, and it's a compilation of 44 different life stories. It was curated by a woman named Maya Kamarota, and most of the authors were in a coaching program with her over the course of the last year. And her question to them was, and this is where the stories come from, and it's very interesting if you kind of go with me for a minute. The question is, if you had 2 hours to live, what would you say? What sentence would you want to leave as your legacy, as something that you leave behind for the world, for your family to have? And
Great question.
it's a big one, and you have 2 hours to figure it out, and it's a sentence, and most of the time it's an I believe sentence.
Okay.
And so that I believe sentence gets flushed out, and then the question becomes, what is the life story that you lived that makes you say that? And so the stories that are in the book are those life stories that led these 44 authors to say what they say if they were to only have 2 hours to live.
Powerful.
It's
Powerful.
a powerful book because, like we said before, we humans are so multifaceted. There's just so many sides to us. And to have 44 different people share 44 different messages that are so important to them.
Yeah.
That is what they would choose to leave behind. Lets you light up humanity from all different sides.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? What a fantastic opportunity for you. And the big news was it was also featured in a quite a large publication. Tell me, where were you featured?
It was featured as a gift guide for this Christmas in the Rolling Stone magazine.
Oh, this is a little deal.
It is a little deal. And we also just found out that the book has reached #1 international bestseller status in
Wow.
the week of being out for purchase. So
Lots of
it
celebrations. And then
it's
you got to meet, did you get to meet everyone? Did
yes.
you?
So
How was
I returned from Los Angeles. Not all 44 authors were there because this group is from all over the world. And the people who could meet in LA, there was probably maybe a dozen of us, got to meet in person. And oh my goodness, that time that we got to spend just communicating in all of us, not just our voices, just, you know, a lot of communication is body language. And we miss out on that in Zoom and those interactions. And it was amazing to come together to celebrate, to give that book the voice that it deserves in our lives and in the lives of whoever buys the book and reads it. Just a tremendous celebration. And it brings me to this realization of how important it is to have fun and celebrate and recognize the good things in your life, and just being grateful for even the littlest thing brings you into a different mindset.
Absolutely. And to share your story as well, to share, because so many people think, well, I have got nothing, you know, I've got nothing to share. But we've all been on this journey, haven't we? We've all chosen a different path, and we've all taken a different way of looking at things. And it's nice to just stop and think and meet people from all over the world who've been through some, you know, really traumatic life experiences, and you've come out smiling and supporting and sharing that with other people. It's really, really special. It warms my heart.
Absolutely. And just recognizing that my story is not the same as anybody else's story. And the only thing I really need is to know my very next step. I don't need to have the whole path laid out. I don't need to have a plan for the next 10 years, step by step, because life is going to change. Life is going to give you different opportunities. And the responsibility that I choose to take today is for my very next step. Whether it's I'm not going to eat meat for lunch, or I am not going to go and meet up with friends and drink something other than club soda. Right?
It's about balance or harmony, isn't it? Someone said, instead of thinking of it as balance, it's harmony, so it just flows, rather than feeling that it's should or shouldn't. It's what, we know ourselves, we know that the consequences are there. It's just sometimes about taking the right action, because it might feel like it's hard initially, but we're parenting ourselves, aren't we? We're looking out for ourselves, and it's finding those other self-soothing techniques and asking yourself, do you really deserve that? What is it that you really deserve? And you've got to beautifully thinking about your children are watching, you're teaching them how to deal with a difficult day and how to deal with a difficult diagnosis. It's the same, isn't it? It's how do you deal with that? Do you take action and look for a positive solution? Or do you fall apart and crumble and grab on unhealthy things that aren't going to support you? There is another way.
And then there's always grace, right? So as humans, we have this tendency of being critical of ourselves. But when we recognize that there's always grace to forgive what has already happened, but move forward in a different direction. Somebody said, I don't know if you talk to your audience about limiting beliefs. You do. So there's a rephrase to limiting beliefs. And in a graceful way, you can call them protective beliefs. Those are the beliefs that have given you some value over your lifetime. They have given you the ability to stay on whatever path you were on before and protected you. But at some point, you recognize that it's time to let them go.
Yeah, it's time for the next chapter.
Right.
And so the next chapter for you, 2022, what are you hoping to be sat here at the end of 2022 celebrating?
Oh, so I just finished thinking about that this morning, and I honestly hope to grow my coaching practice to not a huge level, because like you said, it isn't balance, it's harmony, and I want my family life and my professional life to be in harmony. And so that's the goal. My coaching practice would grow. I would love to do some speaking engagements, and I would love to launch at least 3 online courses that I have planned for next year. And those are very doable, and I'm excited to move forward and can't wait to see it come to fruition.
Yay, me too. Oh, well, lovely to catch up with you. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and hopefully you'll be back again. We can catch up with you again, and when you've got your courses ready to launch, you can come and share all about them.
I would love to. Thank you for having me, Claire.
Thank you.